Okay, today I'm going to be arguing why a wealth tax is not just in America. So first of all, let's get into what a wealth tax is. A wealth tax is a tax on an individual's total income, and that includes their assets. So any cars, or if you have a nice yacht or a watch or any other homes that you have, this is assuming that the person is very wealthy. It taxes all of that combined. So it's not just your income, it's also your assets. And it's also a tax that is only on the upper, certain percent of individuals who are wealthy. We're going to talk about why it is unjust. Here's some of the main reasons. It's going to do a lot of damage to businesses. It will not work in general. It's not fair. It punishes the successful, and capital flight. And capital flight is basically leaving the country because you don't like the way that the government is treating you. So here's some other tax policies just to get you familiar with them. One of them is a flat tax, and that means that the poor and the wealthy both get taxed the exact same amount. So no matter what your income amount is, if it's $30,000 or if it's $300,000, you're still going to get, say it's 10%, you're still going to get the same tax out. So that's why I have the pizza analogy. So you have a small pizza, you have a small slice taken out, and if you have a larger pizza, you have, the same size, the same portion is taken out of the pizza. So another one is the graduated income tax, and that is the one that we have in America. It is as you go up the income scale, you get taxed more. Another one is the national sales tax. That's what you see when you go out to purchase something or buy something. They add a little 6 or 7% tax, depending on where you live. And it's just added, and that goes to the government. The last one is the value added tax. And this is in making a product. There's a tax at every point at which there is value added when the product is made. So if a car goes through, the manufacturing process, they add a tax at every point when something is added to it. So let's get into the issues here. The first one is it's going to do damage to businesses. The wealthy do not just have money stacked up in a bank account. They keep their money in passive income, which is their investments. And a wealth tax would force them to sell off these investments, which means that the stock market would plummet. Essentially, they run the stock market and investments. And the evidence for this and the fact that it does damage to businesses and businesses are owned by wealthy people is that you will never be hired by a poor person or someone who is much poorer than you. And if you do, it's fruitless. All right, the next is that enforcing it will not work. It's not logical, and it would be very, very difficult to enforce. It's hard to evaluate all of someone's assets and also the value of them. Like certain historical things, like if you have the Mona Lisa in your basement, you cannot evaluate that per se, but it's worth a lot. It's also an invasion of privacy if the government if they want all of your assets, if they want to know what you have. It's an invasion of privacy, and they have to assess the value of every single thing that you own. Some of the numbers and the reasons why this won't work, they started with this in Europe in 1990. 12 countries had a wealth tax, and now it is just down to 4. And it's a failure over there. All right, next we're going to get into why it punishes the successful. It's unethical, per se, to just take more money from the successful. Elizabeth Warren argues that there's a large inequality in wealth. Well, I think it's unequal. It's to tax at a larger rate just because someone's making more money. And it might even be unconstitutional. In Article 1 of Section 9 of the Constitution, it says that the government cannot place a direct tax on anyone, or they cannot levy direct taxes on people. And the last one is that capital flight. So this is the wealthy parking their money overseas somewhere else and putting it in offshore accounts. Taxing them more would really be nothing but irritating to them. They do not owe the government anything. They don't owe the government any money. And the government really relies on the wealthy more than the wealthy relies on the government. So they have no problem with moving to a country that is much nicer to them. An example of this, some evidence for this, is that in 2016 to 2018 in France, 22,000 millionaires fled the country after they placed the wealth tax. So really the result from this is that once they place that wealth tax on there and they're not getting the money they need from the millionaires because they're moving, it just creates more of a burden on the lower class and the middle class instead. The solution, instead of a wealth tax, in my own opinion, of course, would be a flat tax. So taking the same amount. Obviously, it's not as beneficial for the government, and there are issues with that, but it's fair, and no one can really argue against it. Everybody's getting taxed at the same rate. Even though the rich are getting taxed more, they're still getting the same piece out of the pie as the poor are. And I think another solution would be a national sales taxes, placing a tax on certain products when you got to shop or when you make a purchase. Thank you very much.